Now it's time for today's perspective, and we're talking today about the variety of life on planet Earth. That is to say, the number of different species living in a certain place on Earth, or in scientific terms, biodiversity. It's being noted by my guest today that during the 2022 presidential campaign here in France, candidates actually spoke about biodiversity for only 1% of the time. And they did that without sparking any kind of outcry from the population. And yet he says, well, it should be a major concern for all of us, biodiversity, a tool that supports our quality of life. Well, my guest then is Professor at the French National Museum of Natural History and at the University of Gdańsk, and author of the new book, De la Biodiversité, comme, humanisme, or Biodiversity as a Form of Humanism. Marc-André Selosse, thank you very much for being with us on the programme. Just explain to us then, why is biodiversity so important to us as human beings?
Yeah, because long ago we started to say nature should be defended. The diversity of life, of living beings, and genetic diversity is something important in itself. But if you think of it, it's important for you. It means that if you look at your clothes with cotton, silk, wool, if you look at your fridge, simply open your fridge and look at the diversity of species you are eating, providing you their energy. It's important for us as human beings. And finally, we are supported by an internal microbial ecosystem, the microbiota, which support our health, help our functions. So we are really built by biodiversity.
So in other words, it's not just about saving those plants, saving those animals, but also saving ourselves. I mean, we need that structure in order to survive.
Yeah, in a way, as a naturalist, as myself, someone very involved in studying especially fungi, I could tell you it's important in itself. And I think there is a moral value there. But no matter. We said that since the 70s. And it's now the 50 years, by the way, of the laws of nature protection in France. And since then, very few steps were made. Now it's time to realize that whenever your microbiota is decaying because you don't eat fibers, because there are too much of emulsifiers or preservative compounds in the food you eat, then your microbiota is decaying, and this is opening the door to diabetes, obesity, neurological problems such as Alzheimer or Parkinson diseases. It means that the decay of this internal biodiversity is making you sick. And now also, if you look at the climate, the decay of our forest is simply making more CO2 in the atmosphere. So it's both from the environmental and health sides, something that whenever biodiversity decays, you decay.
And is that something, I mean, you know, as you said, we've heard for years, haven't we, that there are severe natural environmental problems, but perhaps the way that you're doing it, trying to make people realise that actually this is about our economies, it's about us. Do you think that means that people might pay a bit more attention to it?
Well, you know, there are figures about ecological transitions. It's said that globally, without making it since the 60s, we lost 20 points of gross income. You know, this national gross product was reduced by 20% compared to what it could have been if we were making this transition. It is now known in a country like France that whenever you put €1 in the ecological transitions, you make €3 of benefit after that. And you don't have to pay €3 to compensate. It's now time to understand that when biodiversity decays, it's more expensive. In America, some places of America have no more bats. Bats are eating insects. In the regions where there is no bat, you have to pay 30% more insecticides because they are not there to protect the cultures. And in those regions where there are no more bats, you have 8% more death of children because of juvenile cancers or malformations during the pregnancy. That means that whenever biodiversity decays, it's the economy that is running at higher cost, also your health that is more costly. It's also simply a money issue. We say it since decades, we said it for the climate, but we scientists are not sufficiently listened when we warn. And I think for the climate now it's clear. For biodiversity, should we wait for disasters before it's clear? We need it.
I read another example recently in an interview you did from here in France, where black currant growers here in France having to actually breed their own bees.
Yes, well, there are many solutions now based on biodiversity. You're right to make the point that it's one thing is to say the warning, one other is the solutions. We know a way of making agriculture that is making, for example, the propagation of illness less important. With ages, you reduce the propagation of pathogens from one field to another by 80%. Partly because there are bats in the ages. You can also use a mix of varieties that are a use of genetic biodiversity, and that limits the spread of the illness by 40%. You can also mix in a field different cultures such as a legume and a cereal, and then the pathogens they struggle to go over. Again, you reduce the propagation by 40%. You can, from one year to another, use biodiversity to not cultivate the same thing before 10 years are elapsed. And then the pathogens are dead in the soil because they don't find their food. They have to wait 10 years for their species, their host to come back. When you add all that, you use biodiversity, genetic species biodiversity, and you use less pesticides. It's one of the many examples where biodiversity can help. I could also show you a couple of examples where we don't use correctly biodiversity in the cities, and this doesn't help us to cope with climate change in the cities. Biodiversity is a solution because not only we neglect that we are based on it, but we neglect the solutions that we could have using it better.
So why are politicians not getting it right? I mean, that note that I read about at the beginning there, that 1% of the time in the last French presidential campaign was spent talking about biodiversity. Of course, we've got another presidential campaign coming next year. I mean, do you have any hope that politicians will talk about it then?
I have any hopes. Otherwise, I wouldn't speak with you. But let's come back to the point that politicians, they are designed to speak to the people with agencies, advisors. They perfectly fit the opinion. And our problem is more general than a problem of politicians, is that we as modern Occidental people, we don't believe in nature as a solution, whereas our life and history were simply nature-based solution. The history tells us that everything was in the nature and we built with it. And now we don't believe in it. Our training, our teachings, our curricula, they don't contain enough of biology. And we are orphans. We are orphans of what biology and what biodiversity could give us because we have a cultural problem that we don't solve by education enough.
Got 15 seconds to answer because we're running out of time. Do you fear for the future?
Yes and no. I believe in humans. That's why I wrote a book based on humanism. I hope we can wake up, but please listen to the calls and the possibilities we have under the arms in science.
Good to talk to you on the programme today. Thank you very much for being with us. It's Marc-André Selosse, who's professor at the French National History Museum of Natural History and at the University of Gdańsk as well. His new book, as I said, De la Biodiversité, comme humanisme, or Biodiversity as a Form of Humanism.
Merci.
Thanks so much for being with us. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.